noteworthy when you set them against the typical hostile environment for the conduct of elections in the country. But as the Ondo state election, and indeed the earlier one in September 2020 in Edo makes clear, there are still serious deficits, serious areas of improvement that we need to address as we move ahead after the Ondo and Edo elections. I think basically these are mainly structural and cultural issues regarding attitudes towards election and to politics in general, the do-or-die approach, the generally anti-democratic structures of our political parties. So these are issues that we still need to go to address, even as we acclaim what has happened in Ondo State last Saturday. We begin the report with the political context, where we looked at the fissures, the defection of the deputy governor, which cast some gloom over the conduct of the elections in terms of possibility for intra-party violence and for the emergence of a third party in the electoral process, a third force in the electoral process in the form of the ZLP that might hive votes away from the APC and the PDP, making the elections very, very competitive. But as it turned out, that has not been the case because the APC candidate, the incumbent governor, won what many people regard as a landslide victory, beating his second opponent by over 96,000 votes, which in a way looks like a repeat of what happened in Edo State. We also notice that moving on to the campaign itself, the election campaign itself, we were pleased that the citizens of Ondo State raised critical issues about the elections, particularly in terms of the programs of the major political parties in areas of human development, such as education and female and maternity health care. I think this is refreshing and goes beyond the usual focus on personality cults and sectarianism that tend to characterize elections in our country. Then with regard to INEC's preparations, I think our findings show that generally the collation process at the various collation centers went on well, and our results were uploaded without delay on the INEC result viewing portal. The uploading also enabled stakeholders to track the progress of result uploads and project the outcome of the elections before the final declaration. In the case of Ondo election, for example, the results were processed within about 7 to 8 hours of the close of polls. I think we need to commend INEC for this innovative approach to the management of collation of election results and announcements. But we would like INEC going forward to continue to enhance not only the results management process, but also the electoral process in general. And we feel that it is important for INEC in this respect to begin to focus on the replacement or upgrade of equipment such as smart card readers, or indeed other ICT tools that have been used for the elections. With respect to voter turnout, we find that there has been a progressive fall in the voter turnout rate since 2012 elections, declining from 38.10% in 2012 to 35.2% in 2016 and to 32.7% these last elections. But there are some bright spots in some local government areas that record voter turnout that are not that are different, in fact higher than the general turnout that we have just seen of about 38 point something percent these last elections, 32.7% these last elections. The local governments include Akoko Northeast at 38%, Akoko Northwest 42.9%, Akoko South 44.6%, Akoko Southwest 40.6%, Ondo 34.7%, and and Owo 34.7%. With respect to the adherence to the COVID prevention protocols, we found that there was widespread disregard by voters of the COVID-19 protocols that the Presidential Task Force and INEC had issued. Face masks were generally not worn, and social distancing was not observed. INEC staff, in fact, had difficulty enforcing compliance with these requirements by voters who are on queue for accreditation and voting. But INEC had little control because we feel that it's a cultural problem that has been shaping our response to the COVID prevention protocols. But it is also noteworthy that in most cases, INEC provided hand infrared thermometers and sanitizers as required under their protocols. Vote buying was a major concern that came out of our finding, because in several polling units, although some voters pushed against vote buying, seeking to induce them to vote for their preferred candidates, but generally, vote buying was on the increase throughout most of the local government areas where we had observers. In fact, at several polling units, CDD observers reported a consistent pattern of vote buying involving vote buyers who use various devices to evade the watch of security officers and election observers. Increasing threat of fake observers. Another trend that we noticed in the election was the presence of fake news and fake observers, particularly the latter, who were neither accredited by INEC nor trained to engage in non-partisan observation. CDD investigations showed that the role of these fake observers was to muddy the voters and conflate the messaging about key processes in the election being disseminated by genuine observers. So finally, our conclusions and recommendations are the following. Although the 2020 elections in Ondo was largely peaceful, there remain potential dark clouds that portend ill winds for the conduct of credible elections, not only in Ondo State, but also in Nigeria. And this must be addressed urgently. Party politics in Ondo, as in Nigeria generally, continue to be plagued by huge deficits in intra-party democracy and the marginalization of women, youth, and other marginalized groups. To this must be added, as we already reported, the impunity exhibited in vote buying, even in the presence of the police and security agents. In fact, for us, the paradox of the election is the cohabitation of an issues-based peaceful election that is also characterized by the warped drama of vote buying, which many voters watched with amusement, even if helpless to stop it. In this respect, the CDD recommends as follows. A, immediate enactment of legislation to establish an electoral offenses commission to deal with the rising incidence of vote buying and other forms of electoral corruption and offenses during elections. B, the creation of a civil society network of volunteers at polling units dedicated to monitor and discourage vote buying on election day. And C, party reform to make the country's political parties reflect democratic culture and accountability, transparency, and inclusion. And lastly, as suggested earlier, INEC should continue to enhance not only the results management process, but also the electoral process in general. Towards this end, INEC should begin the replacement or upgrade of equipment such as the smart card readers, or indeed looking for better multifunctional equipment that can encompass the entire process from the registration of new voters through to the processing of results. How to implement some of these recommendations are fully laid out in the report of the West-led Election Reform Committee of 2008. Going forward to build on the gains of the 2020 elections and to clear the dark clouds that hung over it requires revisiting and implementing these recommendations of the ERC. CDD is hopeful that INEC and relevant stakeholders in state and society, particularly in Ondo State and Nigeria generally, will come together to address the dark spots and doing so brighten the prospects for the conduct of not only peaceful but also free and fair elections in Ondo, with commendable lessons learned for future elections to enhance democracy and development in the country. Thank you.
The darkness in which collation is actually done and several other challenges. But for these elections, it's quite interesting for us, considering the fact that by 5 hours, there was a upload of up to 70% on the result viewing platform. So if you look at the graph which we have actually projected, we have projected a graph to give you a 3-level summation of what the upload was during the elections. 1 speaks to 5 hours after, 7 hours after, and 24 hours. By 7 hours after, we had like 6 complete collation at 100% upload of all the polling results, followed by another 99%, followed by 98%. At this point, it makes it very, very difficult to introduce any error or any fraud into the process. So a combination of the smart card reader, if immediately revamped and replaced by INEC, and this platform is adding credibility to elections. And I think that the next we want INEC to do is to add a submission to this very important innovation, such that the result will start tallying itself together at the same time. And I think one thing we also mentioned in our pre-election briefing when it comes to the outcome of the elections itself is the fact that votes in the state historically have been on senatorial districts, so zonal affiliation, and that itself was re-emphasized with the way the elections went in the Ondo election, again adding credibility from an historical point of view on the geography of votes to the outcome of the election itself. But while there are positives which we've highlighted, the issue-based politics, the fact that it was very peaceful, we remain very worried that the trio of violence, vote buying, and in particular fake news is fast determining the outcomes of elections in this country. We were all there to see what actually happened, the kind of fabrication, the kind of fake news that came out on Saturday, Friday itself. And all these are very, very important, which we don't just have to legislate on. We have to have we have to come up with very important strategies in terms of addressing these issues in our electoral process. Either we like it or not, they are very important, and they are beginning to be the new way, especially with innovations such as the result viewing platforms, smart card reader, in terms of winning elections in the country. And I think the other issue I want to re-emphasize itself is the influx of fake observers. And I think that this is very important. Some of them are duly accredited, some are not accredited. And the fact that they continue to muddy the water makes the work we do different, reduces the trust of the citizens in observation process. And it will be very important that in the forthcoming election, INEC does more in terms of weeding out most of these people in the accreditation of observers process. And And lastly, in all the the Edo elections and of course these Ondo elections, the police has been, in particular, led by the Inspector General of Police and all the security agents who participated in the elections, have all been commended, particularly with the civility with which they go about their duties on election day. But we will again want to highlight that being civil is actually good, and it is expected because they are meant to be the protectors of citizens. But turning blind eyes to electoral offenses are not enough, because the real problem we have is that of impunity. And the more they continue to do that without effectively implementing the law, electoral impunity will reign in the country, and people, at least when there are no immediate sanctions, people will continue to breach the law itself. So I think this is a very, very important point that we expect should be addressed in all the forthcoming off-season elections before the next off-cycle election in 2021. Thank you very much.